We've been told time and again that God is working in our lives, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Whether you are struggling in life or simply plodding along, we have all experienced times when we have felt abandoned by God. I can remind you again that God is working in your life all the time, but instead, I'm going to show you 3 signs God is working in your life so you can see firsthand that He has not abandoned you. When you are experiencing trials, this is a sign that God is working in your life. That may sound counterintuitive, but it is true nonetheless. We often associate trials with punishments and blame ourselves or even others when things go wrong. But nothing ever goes wrong. Life might go differently than you expected and include more hardships than you would choose, but it always goes according to God's plan. When life gets hard, we naturally wonder why God would allow us to experience such hardships. Maybe we even begin to doubt God and His goodness. But trials are not a sign that God has abandoned you. They are the opposite. They are a sign that God is working in your life. James chapter 1 verse 2 through 4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." When we experience trials, our faith in God is tested. Nobody knows this better than Job, who lost his family, his possessions, and his health in one fell swoop. But he suffered for a reason. God allowed Satan to put Job through trials so that his faith could be tested and even strengthened. Satan thought that Job would curse God's name, but instead, he continued to bless God. Job's faith became stronger than ever because he knew that God was with him all the time throughout his suffering. His faith was what kept him going. And today, we look back on Job's story to receive encouragement in our own walk with God. Job proved to Satan that his faith was real and true, and now he proves it to us too. Job serves as an example of maintaining faith during trials. He didn't know why he was experiencing such trials. He had no idea that God was talking to Satan behind the scenes and using him for His glory. But he trusted in God. He trusted that God would get him through his pain if that was His will, and that the existence of his pain was part of God's plan for him in the first place. God allowed Satan to affect Job's life because He knew that Job would make his Father proud. When you experience trials, it is tempting to want to turn away from God because it feels like He has turned away from you. But the best way to face difficulty is with the help of your Father. You can use times of trial as an opportunity to grow closer to God and strengthen your faith. God may even use you as an example to others like He does with Job. When you suffer, remember that it is part of God's plan for you and that He knows what He is doing. He can see far into the future, while you and I can't even see a minute into the future. God will never abandon you during trials. Instead, He is patiently waiting for you with open arms. All you need to do is walk towards Him and allow Him to embrace you and take your burden from your shoulders. What about when nothing seems to be happening in your life? You might be in a period of sameness when nothing bad or good is happening. Could God be working in your life then? Another sign that God is working in your life is when you are provided for. Life may not be exciting or terrifying, but from day to day, all your basic needs are being met. We take these basic needs for granted because we have become so used to having them, but everything we have comes from God. When your home is ripped away by a hurricane, you will recognize how much you appreciated it. You will thank God for the time you spent there and pray that He will find you another home soon. But when we live in our homes with no imminent threat of them being taken away, we begin to think that we are entitled to them. But just because you bought your house with your money, that doesn't make it truly yours. If you take a step back, you will see that you only have that money because God provided you with a job, and therefore you only have the house because God provided it for you. The same thing can be said of all our basic needs like food and health. Every night you sleep well is proof that God is working in your life. Every meal you eat is proof that God is providing for you. Every day that you face from start to finish without suffering harm is proof that God is working in your life. Jesus performed plenty of miracles during his time on earth, but one of the most memorable is the feeding of the 5,000. He traveled to a solitary place with his disciples, but when he got there, a large crowd was waiting for him. But instead of being angry at them for interrupting his personal time, Jesus patiently spoke with them and healed the sick. As the day dragged on, the disciples suggested that Jesus send the people away so they could buy food from the village. But Jesus replied that the people didn't need to go away because they could feed them there. The disciples were confused. They only had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. They could barely feed 50 people, let alone 5,000. But Jesus wasn't worried. He told the people to sit down on the grass and he gave thanks for the food. He began to pass it around and the food traveled throughout the camp with everyone receiving their fill. They even had 12 baskets full of leftover bread. It's unclear whether the crowd was aware of this great miracle or not, but thanks to Matthew recording the event, we are. Even though Jesus did not invite the crowd to join him, he welcomed their presence and provided for all of their needs. This is what he does for you and me as well. Even when we don't realize it, God is always working behind the scenes in our lives to ensure that we have all that we need. Take a minute now to recognize all the wonderful things God has provided for you, such as a home, family, food, health, and whatever else you can think of. And don't forget to thank him for all that he has given you, just as Jesus thanked him for the 5 loaves and 2 fish. We've talked about experiencing trials and we've talked about the everyday average life. But there is one other sign that God is working in your life, and that is when your purpose is becoming clear. We often wander through this life wondering what God's purpose is for us and why he does certain things in our lives. Sometimes we never receive an answer, but other times we can look back and see how God worked things together to enable us to fulfill our purpose. A great example of this is in the story of Esther. Esther was born beautiful, and as a result of her beauty and demeanor, she was chosen as the new queen of Persia after Queen Vashti was deposed. Esther was up against all the other eligible girls in the kingdom, but the king chose her as his new bride. We can see how God was planning for this event from the time of Esther's birth, which is why he made her so beautiful. But then Esther may have wondered why God wanted her to become the queen. What was the point of putting her in that position? Well, that also became clear when Haman convinced Xerxes to kill all of the Jews. Esther was able to use her position as queen and her Jewish background to convince the king not to go through with his plan. Esther was able to save thousands of lives because God placed her in a position to do so. He was with her every step of the way, guiding every event to lead her to the moment when she stood before the king, begging for the lives of her people. God probably won't use you and me to save thousands of lives, but you never know. However, no matter what happens in our lives, we can be sure that God is leading us to fulfill his will. Can you look back on your life right now and see how some of the decisions you made led you to where you are right now? Can you see how God has been guiding you every step of the way? Maybe you were recently able to encourage your friend in their walk with God because you encountered similar struggles to them. Or maybe you simply smiled at someone who really needed it. There are countless ways that God can use us in the lives of others, and he does so more often than we realize. He is always working in our lives to use us for his honor and glory. If you've been feeling like God has abandoned you, you could not be more mistaken. Whether you're going through good times or bad, or simply plodding along, God is always working in your life. He gives you struggles so that you can strengthen your faith in him like Job. He provides for you in your daily walk with him in ways that you probably aren't even aware of. God loves you so much that he desires to provide for your every need like he did with the feeding of the 5,000. If you look back on your life today, you will see how God has used your struggles for his good and how he has provided for you and your daily needs. You will see how God has been working things together in your life so that you can fulfill your purpose here on earth by demonstrating his love and glory. Whether your life feels stagnant or out of control, it is never either of those things. God is always in control, and He is always working in your life. If you look for it, you can see the ways in which He has worked in your life and be confident that He will continue to do so.